Hi, I'm Lisa Savage. Welcome to Pathways to Progress, where we talk about city government once a month here at the Portland Media Center. And we're on the second Friday of each month at 7 o'clock. I'm here with Roberto Rodriguez, City Councilor tonight. Victoria Pelletier is usually with us, but the storm caused a lot of changes, and one of the changes was she couldn't be with us. So we're going to have a varied show. We're going to talk a little bit about April Fool's jokes. We're going to talk a lot about the school budget, which is a really good show to have you, Roberto, part of, because you were the chair of the school board for many years, so you really understand the school budget. And then we also are going to be hearing from some citizens in Portland, how they feel about the school budget. And finally, we will talk about the big astronomical event on Monday, the eclipse. So thanks for being with us, and let's get started. How's your week been, Roberto?
Oh, I think like many other Portlanders, this is a tough week. Many of us started the week and went through the weekend without power. A lot of folks I know experienced with downed trees and other issues with the storm. So I certainly hope that everyone is safe now and the second storm didn't cause too much trouble. But I think we all had a really challenging week in that regard. And I know that you also had to deal with the weather and family. And
this is not my favorite time of year, regardless. It's mud season. I'm always like, other people call this spring, but in Maine, it's mud season.
And we're guaranteed some mud now after this mess in the last 48 hours. So
yes.
Here we go.
Here we go. We're hanging in there. Well, some levity. Let's introduce a little humor here. So there was an op-ed or a column, an opinion column in the Portland Press Herald earlier in the month that proposed some changes to city government. And I know that you read it and I read it. I'm just going to read a little bit of it so people at home that did not read it can hear from it. They said, first, competitive elections will be abolished. No more vote for me. No more sloganeering. No more name recognition, as if that was a bad thing, name recognition. Instead of popularity contests, members of every representative office in our city will be elected by sortition. I think they made that word up. Or through a lottery system with officials chosen at random for a term of 1 year. We will have 66 districts, each containing roughly 1,000 people. This will make our city a true government of the people. The mechanics of election by sortition are simple. An algorithm will randomly select a name from the city's draft rolls. What do we think about this idea?
Brilliant. I love it.
You love it?
Sign me up. 100%. That was great. I got the link of this article with the day on April 1st, and the person that sent it to me just wrote, "I love it." And I just read the heading, and it said, a new form of government. So I just wrote back, "Oh, you like it? I'm gonna have to read it." And so I went into reading it, fully immersed, saying like, I have to respond to this person. And after the first few lines, I realized what I was reading, which is like April Fool's joke. But I thought it was brilliant because it was written by two former charter commissioners.
Yes.
And then one of them who is just brilliant in terms of like his April Fool's jokes over the last few years. So I'm surprised that I got caught off guard. But I just love the idea. I think right before the show you were mentioning where the origin of the idea probably came from. I wasn't aware of that. So I love the originality. I love the humor behind it. I love the people that put it out there. Just brings it, that much more serious.
Yeah, they say the origins of democracy, maybe not really true. Actually, a lot of indigenous cultures have very democratic decision-making and power sharing. But in Western tradition, we would say that democracy came from Athens, the city-state of Athens in ancient times. And if you were a property-owning male who was adult, you had to serve. You had to take a turn serving in the government. And whether you wanted to or not, whether you were that type of person or not, it was a duty. It was like jury duty. Because nobody ever tries to get out of jury duty, right? They just, you get your paper in the mail and you go, jury duty, I got to do my civic. But it's always been an interesting idea to me. And the fact of having so many more representatives. I can remember my father was in city government in California years ago, and he said, there's really no reason why everyone in the city couldn't vote on each decision. Like the city council could kind of get it in order, and then every morning when you got up, especially with the advent of personal computers, you could vote. Do we want to increase the parking fines? Do we want to start school after Labor Day? Everybody could vote. I still haven't really seen that happen, though.
We haven't, and and to your point, like there's a lot of serious points here that we can dig into. Participatory budgeting is something that we've talked about for many years, and I know that there's municipalities all over the country that have implemented different variations of it, and that is kind of what you're alluding to, like have a form of government that decision making is more inclusive. And while this is a great joke, there are a lot of puns or a lot of little bits there to dig into that can certainly make government better functioning and more democratic, right? And have more participation from the folks that are being served by its government.
I was feeling good about their idea until they got to the word algorithm. I mean, I know algorithm just means like a math equation that, but we've had so much bad experience with algorithms, I think, in terms of censorship of social media in recent years, that word now kind of makes me flinch. Okay, then it gets better. Next, we're proposing a tricameral system of government. So there's the Popular Assembly with the 66 people, Popular Assembly of Legislative Supremacy, so acronym is PALS, a House of Landlords and Yeomanry, so that acronym is HOLY, and a 3-person Supreme Highmost Unlimited Council of Knowledge System, SHUCKS Troika. Our 9-person city council will be gone, so will our city manager. All 3 new branches have key roles, but the PALS shall be our chief lawmaking and deliberative body.
I love it. I love it. I think the acronyms had me going. I think that was the best part. That was the hardest part to finish the whole article. Just like reading the acronyms was great. I love it. I love everything about it. It's obviously it's meant to be a joke, but like I said before, it should have also made you stop and think. Right? It should also made you like ponder, like, oh my goodness, like this might be a joke, but should we really rethink? And obviously the commission had the proposal last time, but we should be constantly thinking about the functionings of local government and how effective it is. So I love everything about it.
So you got the very, very democratic, very representative council that has the most power, and then you've got this House of Landlords and Yeomanry. Yeomanry usually means working. It's like a very ancient word for like the working people, the people that. So lumping them together with landlords seemed a bit odd to me, but I think it was just done to achieve the acronym HOLY, is my interpretation of that. And I mean, I'm not saying that you guys are not doing the best with the system that you've been given. One of the biggest thing I've learned from doing this show is how little power the city council really has. People have the illusion that the city council is like they're ruling Portland. That is so not true under the system of government.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is 100% true. I don't think that that's a problem. I think that that's part of the design, right? Like it's divided by 9 people and no one of them has any greater power than the other. And it does take a lot of collaboration to get things going. I think that it has potential to be more effective at creating change. I think that the avenues are there for the council to be incredibly effective at creating not just change, but like how do I say, like change in the areas that we all care about, like social justice and equity and racial justice and these things. I do think that the current system allows that. I think it makes it really difficult, however. It's not the easiest way to create change, but I do think it's possible. I think you need to have the right people in place. You need to have kind of like this comprehensive approach at the work. And while we've made good conversations about it, I know that we've talked about having a goal of using an equity lens for all of our decisions. I think that there needs to be a lot more behind that to back it up and to make it effective. Like what are our processes to check equity in our decision making? What are our processes to, Rachel Talbot Ross had that, when they passed that legislative bill to look at the racial impact of every decision that's made. We should have something similar here. So these things, I think, are small pieces that I think need to be put in place for it to happen. So I guess all to say that under its current shape, it's not very effective, but I do think it has the potential to be.
The voters rejected having the mayor be a strong executive to whom.
And I didn't agree with that either, because that also makes it lopsided.
I know you didn't. You and Victoria differed on that at the time, I remember. But then when I saw councilors try to stop encampment sweeps, it was like the city staff is like, you can't.
But the power was there. The councilors could have done it. It could have. The system was there. It's just the will wasn't there. Okay. Right? Or the agreement, but the power was there. If we would have had 2 more votes, the council would have overturned. the status quo. And so the system allowed us to do it. It was just that the will wasn't there for those votes to line up. Or maybe they just didn't agree with the process that I chose to put in front of us. But I think that we certainly paved the path for significant progress and change, and the votes just didn't line up.
Yeah. Well, in politics, you win some and you lose some, and you're not going to win them all.
No, you're
I'll
not.
just end this. They've proposed that there should be some new names for our city because they would be changing the government so much. So some of the suggestions were Poetland, Arcadia by the Sea, because Arcadia is really popular, I know. Democracity, that's a good one. Brewville, and then some other silly ones. Brooklyn, I don't think, Falmouth Beforeside, that was also.
Oh, I like that.
So if you didn't know it was a joke by the time you got to the list of new names for Portland, you knew it then.
That one definitely seals the deal for sure.
Well, let's move on to a more serious subject, and that is the school budget and how the city council and city government interact with the school budget process. We're going to hear from a couple of Portland residents on the street that Warren and I approached, so let's roll that, Warren. We've heard from the school district that the school budget will go up, but they've had to cut several positions and services to accomplish it. And then if the city voters pass it, city property taxes will go up. But how do you feel about the school budget? Will you be supporting it?
I will. I mean, I feel like they've got me in a tough place. I don't know that those funds are always perfectly well allocated, but if you ask me, do I want more funding for the schools? The answer is kind of always yes.
Our current generation, if we don't make sure that they get what they need to get to survive in the world, even though it is hard with the economy, but we do have to put the schools first and the children first. That is the most important thing when it comes to budgeting in Portland.
I will just note that we did interview a third person who had a slightly different opinion, and we had some tech challenges with that interview. That person was disabled and older and said essentially schools are really important, but people are really struggling financially, so I don't think it should go up or down, she said. I think it should remain the same. Now, we all know that if you keep the budget at the same level of dollars spent, you're going to have to cut positions or services or both, because inflation, you're not going to be able to fund the same thing last year with those dollars. But there have been some developments even since I did those interviews on Tuesday. So can you fill us in?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll do as best as I can. A couple of points on what they said. I to your point, when you roll over the budget from the year before, you have anticipated increases in wages. Inflation increases the cost of a lot of your overhead expenses. So you naturally, even if you don't add anything to your budget, you're going to have increases. And so these increases in school budgets and certainly the municipal budget need to be covered through raising taxes, municipal taxes or property taxes, which is then what the burden that folks talk about. I agree with actually all three of the people that spoke. I think that our schools need to be properly funded, and they're a fundamental piece of our community. So I'm always going to support, fully funding the school budget, and I'm always going to trust the experts that are coming up with those budgets as far as what they think is important to include, allocating resources. And then the other part of the third speaker, which is, the way that we make affordability or the city affordable, property taxes are a big part of that. And I know for a fact that, when my escrow account, adjustment comes up every year and my mortgage goes up, we live on a pretty much on a fixed income. Our income doesn't go up every year the way that other people do. I mean, I'm certainly not making a killing every year. So we live on a tight budget, and so I need to be cautious with people that are similar to us, in that those property taxes could make it that you can no longer afford to live in this city down the line. So I think those are really important to keep in mind. Now, to the budget itself, when the budget was first presented from the superintendent to the school board, he did something that I thought was really interesting, and I commented this on the last board and city finance committee meeting. They did a zero, I think they call it zero-based budgeting, which is pretty much instead of looking at the rollover and seeing, how do we do this again this year, and they actually started almost from scratch and started to build each department budget from a zero position, and then come up with this final presentation that then they brought up to the board. I think that's a really good exercise. I mentioned that I was a bit jealous because I'd have been intrigued to have gone through it and see where we landed. I'm certainly intrigued to see what, if the city were to do that, where do we land? And I compared it to when I was on the school board and we were trying to find ways to, add some funding to certain programming that we thought was important. We were looking at what we described as legacy spending or legacy programming, right? Things that we've always done simply because we've always done it. And trying to question, should we continue to do it, or is this not tied to our goals of equity and reinvest that money? And that was really difficult to have that conversation because in essence what you're doing is you're taking something away. And you're taking something away that's been around for a while. But the zero-based budgeting in essence does that. It allows you to look at everything from a zero position and really gauge it against your goals and see if it belongs on the budget or not. Anyways. So I appreciated that, and I was happy with the exercise that they went through. But the budget itself included a lot of cuts, or a lot of positions that were going to be cut.
Like instructional positions.
Exactly,
like teachers,
classroom positions, edtechs. There was extended learning opportunities. The ELO positions, directors at both high schools was going to be cut. To make it happen.
Explain what that position does.
So the Extended Learning Opportunities Coordinator are people in each of the high schools that help students make connections to programming opportunities all throughout the city, including internship positions, stipend positions with nonprofits that are doing educational programming, leadership programming, workforce development programming. So it's all intended to help youth that might not be perfect candidates for post-secondary education that enter the workforce to make those connections in our community and also to gain skills and knowledge that are going to be useful in the workforce. So it's just an incredibly important piece to students that are not going to be going to college right after high school and have been incredibly successful. I had, through all the nonprofits that I've been in contact with, I've heard of dozens, if not hundreds of students that have been channeled to different programming because of this director and because of these two directors, because there's one in each high school. And so again, incredibly valuable in connecting students to opportunities. And so replacing that work would have been incredibly difficult from the school department. The edtechs, their work in supporting students in the classrooms and teachers, of course, that's a huge loss. And then it speaks right to the discussion of classroom size, right? Because if you have one extra ed tech, that really makes a difference in how the classroom management takes place. And you take that ed tech away, everything changes. And then there were other positions. The Make It Happen program was also potentially being cut. So all these things were being framed as, in a time of difficult decisions, we're making cuts that are away from the classroom or away from the students. And my comments on that are, and I've said this many times because that phrase gets tossed around every year, that there aren't very many things, if anything, that is truly away from the students. All of these positions that we just talked about, they're not in the classroom, right? They're not in your student's face, but they clearly provide opportunities and give services to students that are immensely valuable. So to say that it's okay to cut that because it's not in the classroom starts to tear away at what we hear from folks when we ask them about the school budget. Oh, I support it because I want the kids to have everything that they need. And to start to say like, oh, that's not as important. It doesn't do a good job at educating the populace about what education really is and what our schools really do. So I pushed back a little bit on that framing on their behalf, and whether they took it or not, so be it. But all in all, that was sort of kind of where we were at last week. I'm really rambling today, Lisa.
It's okay.
This is why Tori's so good to have you.
This was going to be the topic anyway, so I thought, okay, Roberto, this is like his, he's been living this for a few years.
Since that joint meeting, the school board has gone back, and I know that they had some updates on some funding, like I believe it's Medicare reimbursement, and I forgot what the other line items were, but school board member Emily Figder proposed some amendments at their finance committee to restore some of these positions, including the ELO coordinators and some of the EdTech positions, and also I think it's a technology navigator, or I forgot the name of the position, but it's another key position that helps students identify opportunities. And I believe that the school finance committee agreed to bring those back because they would not.
The finance committee said yes, okay,
and
good with these changes.
It increases the overall spending, but does not increase the tax rate because the funding for those programs has been identified. So in essence, it doesn't change the bottom line for taxpayers, but it does provide those services and opportunities for the students because those positions will be back in.
So Roberto, why did you guys waste all that COVID money that you had for all those? No,
You know, it's-
I'm joking.
No, no,
and
no,
you
I know that you're-
'cause I worked in public schools for years. When you get a federal grant, like special money during a pandemic, it's very specific when it must be spent, how it must be spent. You cannot hoard that. Well, you could, but you'd be breaking the law.
Yes. Yeah, there were deadlines to spend all that money. It had to be spent down for you to get the next phase of funding.
Yep.
And this is something that was happening in every school district throughout the country, and even the municipalities, right? The city of Portland received, federal funds through ARPA, and they had the same stuff, right? You could only be used for certain things, had to be used by this date, and you have to use it all so you can get the next phase of it. And when that money came in back in 2020 and 2021, I was on the school board, and we were very aware of how it was going to be used, and we knew that it had to be used to cover the specific needs that were being placed on us because of the pandemic. And so all the extra position, every school, the superintendent talked about this, every school department throughout the country at first, when we thought that COVID lived on surfaces, we started to increase our staffing on janitorial staff and people that were in the school buildings cleaning. And then we realized we don't need that, so a lot of those positions started to be cut and eliminated. But there were a lot of things that were happening back then that money was helping to fund. Some of it was programming, some of it was
Well, a
staffing.
lot of instruction went online, and
Yeah. But this is the key part, and this is the part that I really hope people understand. Because you hear it now when people say, oh, there's new money came in, they should use that not to add more programming, but to lower the tax rate. That's exactly what we did with that money. During 2020 and 2021, we passed 0% tax increase budgets,
year after year.
precisely because that's what we thought the money should be used for. One-time expenditures to lower the tax burden on our populace while we were going through a global pandemic. Right? So we passed 0% tax increases while maintaining our schools
But then
funded.
people got used to that.
People get used to free stuff, yes. And today you have, money's drying up. And so now the needs remain the same, right? Because our students and their families still have the same needs. And now we have to figure out how do we continue to deliver these services and support.
And what is the percent increase if the budget as it stands right now today were to pass the school board? Because it's passed their budget committee, but it hasn't passed the school board, hasn't passed the city council, hasn't passed the voters. But if it did, is it 6.85?
They're at 6.8 right now. The city hasn't done their budget. But usually what happens is they're almost like 49, 51%. So when you put them together, you average it out, it becomes like the total tax rate. So the city, I spoke to the city manager today. She'll be presenting her budget next week and sending it to committee. She's going to come in under 6%. So we're anticipating, if things don't change very much, that the combined tax rate is going to be under 6%. 6.8 from the schools and about maybe like a 5 point something close
So
to 6%.
below inflation, in other words.
It will be below inflation, and we'll see. This is where we're going to start at. We'll see if anything else get added. As I've started to, and the city manager mentioned this earlier today, other municipalities are doing their budgets. They're all coming much higher than that. So budget for us looks like we're going to be starting at a lower number than our neighboring municipalities in terms of total tax increase, because they're all facing the same pressures. The ARPA and COVID money running out, and the budget process, or the budget pressures that we have from decreased GA funding to increased needs in our community.
And just the structural foolishness of funding public education from local property taxes. That is a really dumb way to fund education. We are the only country doing it that way. Other rich countries, they have fantastic public education systems that are funded more from a national level because it's a national service. It's a good for everybody. But instead we make it so Cape Elizabeth kids get a fantastic education, and the school districts I used to teach in up in central Maine, there's hardly money for any of those kind of things because the local property tax payers can't bear the burden.
It's really, and what's sad is that Maine actually has, when you look at it nationally, Maine has one of the most equitable school funding formulas, and it is still incredibly regressive in the fact that it's a property tax form. I've said this before. The formula looks at municipalities' ability to raise property taxes based on their valuation, right? The value of their properties. But really, the income of the people that live there are the true gauge of how much you can raise. So, like my house right now and its value is not representative of my income. You'll see that my house makes me look like I am a wealthy, property
Because
owner.
you own property in Portland.
And I'm just like everyone else. I live check to check, and sometimes I really struggle to make ends meet. So I just think the formula is it's backwards.
Terrible. It's terrible. We have about 5 minutes left, so I'm sure we could talk about school budgets and school needs for much longer. But should we transition to the big astronomical event that is happening on Monday?
It's a once in a lifetime thing. Yes, we should.
Coming right through Maine, total solar eclipse. I know that a couple of my young grandchildren are going to be missing school on Monday to come up our way. I live about maybe 15 miles from the path of totality, so we're going to go out and see it. And you guys made some changes to your budget hearing or a public hearing, right, that the city was going to hold.
Yeah, we'll have a city council meeting on Monday, and part of that meeting includes a public hearing for the CDBG funds. And so we had initially a question whether or not we should hold it on that date, just because it is, the eclipse, and we anticipate a lot of people will be out of town, and even some councilors or city staff might even want to be out of town to go be in the path of, the total eclipse. After pushing back and after hearing from the mayor and the manager, it turns out they're just going to make it a hybrid meeting, so councilors and members of the public can join remotely.
Okay.
Public comment will be taken remotely, and councilors can take their votes remotely as well.
What could go wrong?
What could potentially go wrong? So we haven't done a remote one in a while because we had this abuse from members of the public that were calling in. I wouldn't even say members of the public, but really just people that were set out to just disrupt our work.
Trolls. Let's just call them
trolls,
They're
exactly. Assholes, really, is what they were. And they were the disruption and the harassment and the vulgarity and the hate that was coming through was unbearable. So we made a commitment to just go to fully in person. But then this exception is coming in. So now we'll see how things turn out. The mayor will be in charge. He'll have his his finger on the mute button. So he's
probably looking forward to that.
I think I wish him well, because obviously if he does well, that means that we have a good meeting and things get done. But I know that he's probably going to be under a lot of stresses. So I believe the first meeting that he'll be running that's virtual, since he's been mayor. So I'm sure he'll have his finger right over the mute button and be ready to cut people off the moment they step out of line.
Well, he's older than you are, and he probably remembers the Gong Show. That was like a talent show where they could just, you're done. So maybe it'll be a little bit like that. But it's a serious topic, and obviously, a total solar eclipse doesn't cross your path all the time. They happen every few years, but who can afford to go to Sri Lanka to see it or someplace? So I'm super excited because it's right in our neighborhood. But I hope that the city can still conduct its business without hearing a bunch of racist garbage while trying to, conduct the city's business and do the work for the people. So we'll hold a good thought for that. I think we're out of time. Thanks for being here tonight, Roberto.
Good to be here.
Thank you, Portland Media Center, for hosting us. Thank you for our audience at home. Couldn't do the show without you. Thank you for our tech crew, and especially our director, Warren Edgar. Everyone be well and stay safe, and don't get the glasses if you're going to look at the eclipse, okay?